Plus, a big win last night. Zach Merchant, my co-host of the Georgia Vote, joining me now to just talk a little bit more about what we are seeing the day after. We're getting a lot of reaction from the campaign, Zach.
A lot of reactions, and I think a lot about one thing that our guests in studio last night as we were tracking the election results, they told us early in the night, we asked them, what is this night going to be about? What's going to turn these results? They said, turn out. And what we saw was a lot of folks came out to vote in this PSC race in particular. Early in the night, I had somebody, a Republican operative, text me and say, hey, we're at 900,000 votes cast already earlier in the night. And he said, I'm really surprised we're here. Ended up being about 1.5 million votes cast in that PSC race.
1.5 million.
I mean, really exceeding expectations.
And Cheryl and I were talking about that a little earlier today. 21% of the total active voters coming out, not something that you see usually in an off-year election. Right now, we do have those PSC numbers pulled out. Zach, you interviewed all 4 of these candidates before. This came, I want to say it came as a surprise to everyone, but we didn't think that the margins would be this far.
I think a lot of people were surprised by how wide those margins are, but it was a pocketbook race. I think all 4 candidates in one way or another would agree on that. The PSC, of course, is the state body that regulates utilities. There were some structural challenges Republicans and Democrats would both admit because this was an off-cycle election. Most of the people who were going to vote, they're going to cast a ballot in a municipal race. That is in Atlanta's more urban areas, in the cities that in our state tend to skew more Democratic. And in a situation where you had 2 Republican incumbents on the PSC, they thought going into this, they were saying, hey, there's a situation where potentially we're getting a lot of Democratic voters going to cast a ballot in a local mayoral. While they're in the booth, they're looking and saying, okay, which are the other Democrats? That likely played some role in what happened here, but you see that turnout. Strategists, political folks, they're saying now that may also be a sign of some legitimate enthusiasm or frustration, depending on which way you slice it.
That's right. And another race I want to ask you about that also came kind of as a surprise to me was that race down in South Fulton. We know that the incumbent mayor, Khalid Kamal, earlier this year said he wasn't going to run again. Then he said he was going to run again. And we saw him come up with just 4% of the vote. Carmelita Gumbs and Mark Baker going to be going into a runoff, Zach.
And this was a really crowded field. You're seeing just a few of the candidates in this graphic up on your screen here. There were actually, I think, Faith, 9 candidates in total who ran here. And when you see an incumbent mayor who was in the news a lot, got a lot of press attention, not even cracked the top 4 in this result. We asked our panel kind of what that means, and one of the things they said was that, look, don't underestimate how engaged local voters are. They're reading the news, they're watching, they're paying attention, and when they go to cast a ballot, they're thinking about this.
That's right, and he was the change candidate when he first ran, and he beat out the incumbent mayor then, which was Bill Edwards. But now we see that there's another change candidate, Carmelita Gumbs, sitting down with Aisha Howard this morning, basically saying that the city, it is time for a change. How will she do in a runoff? Because you could see potentially even less turnout for that runoff. We will have to see between her and Mark Baker.
And that is it, because even after election night is done, it's still not done. We have runoffs coming up.
Well, Zach, thank you so much. And we will be talking about this Sunday on the Georgia Vote at 11 a.m. And when breaking news and live events happen, you can count on 11 Alive to bring you live coverage on 11 Alive Plus. That is where we were for 3 hours last night. It is free to download and available on your TV.